Happy New Year, Internet. Now, I know, New Year's was a few days ago, but I only do these on a Sunday, so I couldn't very well do one just for New Year's. I'm trying to keep a rhythm where I do it every week like clockwork. So, regardless of that, I hope you all had a good New Year's. I hope you had fun. I hope you made some resolutions that you're going to keep. I myself have made a few. Uh, three, well, technically four. Uh, the first one is, of course, lose some weight because I'm a little big. So, yeah, want to take care of that. Number two, be more organized. Because I've always said that if I were organized, I might be dangerous. And I think being dangerous could be kind of cool. So I'm working on that. Number three, take over the world. That's more of a long-term goal than something in the short term, which is fine. And number four is specifically the resolution that I wanted to talk to all of you about, because I hope each and every one of you out there also made this resolution. It would warm my heart if you did. That particular resolution, number four, is very simple. 5 words. I will read more books. Now, say after me, I will read more books. Okay, one more time, everybody. I will read more books. Good, very good. Now, if you don't keep to any other resolution this year, keep to that one. Because, as I always like to say, you should be reading. Right, now, that's out of the way. So, the book I'm going to talk about today is one that a friend of mine turned me on to. It was several years ago that I was down in the United States visiting with friends, and one of my friends was down there visiting the same friend I was, and he knew I liked crime drama. I'm a huge crime drama fan. I've got Law and Order, CSI, Criminal Minds, several other shows up on the thing. Enjoy watching it. Love the whole concept. Love the idea of cops. Love the stories that you can do with that. And he told me, okay, you like crime drama. And I'm like, yeah, totally. You like noir. I'm like, totally. It's a really interesting genre. He's like, I've got a book for you. I want you to check it out. I'm like, okay, what is it? So we're in the bookstore. He goes, finds it, hands it to me. That book is this one, Noughts and Crosses by Ian Rankin. I don't even have to zoom in on this one. Big bold letters, big picture right here across the front. I don't know if you can get this particular book up here in Canada. Don't know. I know it's down in the States, but they've got other copies of it. Now, Noughts and Crosses is about an inspector in Scotland, Edinburgh to be precise. An inspector, John Rebus, Rebus, like the puzzle, the riddle, that particular Rebus. And this is the first book in the series, and there's quite a few of them out there. It's quite a popular series. I'm surprised I'd never heard of it. And after I got reading it, see, I read this one, and then I had to get more. So I went out and I bought all of this. Now, everything from this one down, I have read. Starting from the bottom, working out my way up, this is what I have read. These three at the top, haven't read yet. There's a novella I need to find that fits in here, so I need to get them. And then there's probably about a good 10 more books in this particular series. Oh, that's getting heavy. Push that aside. Okay. Where was I? Yes. Noughts and Crosses, the very first one. It is all about John Rebus. He's an inspector with Edinburgh Police Department. And he is not the best inspector out there. He's a bit of a drunk. He's got some mental issues in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder or syndrome. I think it is post-traumatic stress. No, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah, he's got some of that going on. He's got some demons from his past connected to that he still hasn't come to grips with. So this and some alcoholism and a general state of despair seem to follow him around. Prevents him from being a really good detective. Now, the interesting thing is, this particular book, Noughts and Crosses, is not what I would term a detective story. It is, but it isn't. See, it's all about currently going on in this book. There is a man abducting and killing little girls in Edinburgh, and he seems to be leaving little clues behind. A piece of string knotted. And he's been leaving these behind at crime scenes, and nobody really knows why. And nobody seems to be able to figure out who this fellow is or how he's getting the children. And yet, something that he doesn't quite connect immediately. Somebody is sending John Rebus matchsticks tied up in cross shapes with little pieces of twine, knots and crosses. That comes into play later on. I mean, it's obvious from a reader's perspective, but not from John Rebus's perspective. He doesn't put it together because he's got his demons, he's got his alcoholism, he's got this despair that he's just trying to make sense of his life. So he doesn't put it all together immediately. He's not on his A game in this book because this first book, like I said, it's not really a detective story, but it is very much a character study of Inspector John Rebus. It delves into his past intensely, shows how he became the man he is in this book. And over the course of this book, naturally, it kind of overcomes his demons. Where he really starts to shine as a detective is in the next book, Hide and Seek, the second one, where I believe, no, I'm not going to go into that. Not today, nope. But he really starts to shine in the second book moving forward, where you get to see his thought processes. Things that are hinted at in this first book, but are not really delved into. Where the real detective work seems to come about is through another police inspector, and by the name of Gil, or Jill perhaps. I'm not sure how the Scots pronounce it. It's spelled with a G, but we'll say Jill, Jill Templar. She kind of has a bit of a romance with Mr. John Rebus. She tends to put the pieces together towards the latter half of it. But it really delves into his life and the life of his brother, the life of people around him, his partner. All the while, this crazed serial killer is circling around both the city and John Rebus. And there's a connection there between this killer and Rebus. There's a reason why he's sending him these cryptic little things, waiting for him to figure it out and piece it together. And in the end, he does piece it together. John Rebus does put the pieces together, takes down the bad guy, and is a bit of a hero for it. Naturally, it's a crime novel, so the good guys usually do win. I don't feel bad for saying that much because really, the meat and potatoes isn't it isn't in the conclusion of the story, but it's in the progression of this story that the real joy of reading it comes from. I flew through this book in about a week and immediately headed to the bookstore to buy the next 3 because I love the concept of the character, and he only gets better as time goes on. When he starts becoming very clever, kind of a detective that isn't overly, how to put this, not overly book smart, but he's got a lot of cunning, a lot of cleverness behind him. Uh, Almost like Columbo in a way, where Columbo, he never was very much technologically savvy. He didn't come across as being too bright and intelligent, but some of that was kind of an act. Most of that was kind of an act, with Columbo's sake. A similar thing goes on here, where he's got this where he doesn't seem like he can figure things out, and he does because he knows people. He knows how people act. He's got connections with some of the lower end of the police force. And it's a really good book. It's a really good psychological breakdown and character study of a man as a whole. And I would highly recommend it, if for nothing else, than for that. To get the chance to know Inspector John Rebus and see his life and see what made him tick. If nothing else, if you never read another Ian Rankin Inspector Rebus novel, if you never read another one but that one, you should read it. But if you do read this one, Noughts and Crosses, I can almost guarantee if you enjoy it, you will want to read another one. And what better selling point for any novel is there than that? That if you read one, you will want to read another. How could you get any better? The answer is you can't. So, this week, I'm going to recommend to you all Ian Rankin's Noughts and Crosses. And I'm going to leave you with this. Chapter 1. The girl screamed once. Only the once. Even that, however, was a minor slip on his part. That might have been the end of everything, almost before it had begun. Neighbors inquisitive, the police called in to investigate. No, that would not do at all. Next time he would tie the gag a little tighter. Just a little tighter. Just that little bit more secure. Afterwards, he went to the drawer and took from it a ball of string. He used a pair of sharp nail scissors, the kind girls always seem to use, to snip off a length of about 6 inches. Then he put the ball of string and the scissors back into the drawer. A car revved up outside, and he went to the window, upsetting a pile of books on the floor as he did so. The car, however, had vanished, and he smiled to himself. He tied a knot in the string. Not any special kind of knot, just a knot. There was an envelope lying ready on the sideboard. Chapter 2. It was April 28th. Wet, naturally, the grass percolating water as John Rebus walked to the grave of his father, dead 5 years to the day. He placed a wreath on it so that it lay, yellow and red, the colors of remembrance, against the still shining marble. He paused for a moment, trying to think of things to say, but there seemed nothing to say, nothing to think. He had been a good enough father, and that was that. The old man wouldn't have wanted him to waste his words in any case. So he stood there, hands respectfully behind his back, crows laughing on the walls around him, until the water seeping into his shoes told him that there was a warm car waiting for him at the cemetery gates. He drove quietly, hating to be back here in Fife, where the old days had never been good old days, where ghosts rustled in the shelves of empty houses, and the shutters went up every evening on a handful of desultory shops, those metal shutters that gave the vandals something to write their names, somewhere to write their names. How Rebus hated it all, this singular lack of an environment. It stank the way it had always done, of misuse, of disuse, of the sheer wastage of life. He drove the 8 miles towards the open sea to where his brother Michael still lived. The rain eased off as he approached the skull-gray coast, the car throwing up splashings of water from 1,000 crevices in the road. Why was it, he wondered, that they never seemed to fix the roads here, while in Edinburgh they worked on the surfaces so often that things were made even worse? And why, above all, had he made the maniacal decision to come all the way through Fife just because it was the anniversary of the old man's death? He tried to focus his mind on something else, and found himself fantasizing about his next cigarette. Through the rain, falling as a drizzle now, Reba saw a girl about his daughter's age, walking along the wet grass verge. He slowed the car, examined her in his mirror as he passed her, and stopped. He motioned for her to come to his window. Her short breaths were visible in the cool, still air, and her dark hair fell in rat tails down her forehead. She looked at him apprehensively. "Where are you going, love?" "Kirkcaldy. Do you want a lift?" She shook her head, drops of water flying from her coiled hair. "My mum said I should never accept lifts from strangers." "Well," said Rebus, smiling, "your mum is quite right. I've got a daughter about your age, and I tell her the same thing. But it is raining, and I am a policeman, so you can trust me. You've still got a fair way to go, you know." She looked up and down the silent road, then shook her head again. "Okay, but take care. Your mum was quite right." He wound up his window again and drove off, watching her in his mirror as she watched him. Clever kid. It was good to know that parents still had a little sense of responsibility left. If only the same could be said of his ex-wife. The way she had brought up their daughter was a disgrace. Michael, too, had given his daughter too long a leash. Who was to blame? Rebus's brother owned a respectable house. He had followed in the old man's footsteps and become a stage hypnotist. He seemed to be quite good at it, too, from all accounts. Rebus had never asked Michael how it was done, just that he had never shown any interest or curiosity in the old man's act. He had observed that this still puzzled Michael, who would drop hints and red herrings as to the authenticity of his own stage act for him to chase up if he so wished. But then John Rebus had too many things to chase up, and that had been the position during all of his 15 years on the force. 15 years, and all he had to show were an amount of self-pity and a busted marriage with an innocent daughter hanging between them. It was more disgusting than sad. In the meantime, Michael was happily married with 2 kids and a larger house than Rebus could ever afford. He headlined at hotels, clubs, and even theaters as far away as Newcastle and Wick. Occasionally, he would make 600 quid from a single show. Outrageous. He drove an expensive car, wore good clothes, and would never have been caught dead standing in the pissing rain in a graveyard in Fife on the dullest April day for many a year. No, Michael was too clever for that, and too stupid. So until next week, remember, you should be reading.